The wedding gate swung open at exactly 4 o'clock, and 3 black SUVs rolled up the gravel drive in perfect formation. From the middle car, Liam Carter stepped out, calm, unsmiling, flanked by a team of professional bodyguards who silenced the entire garden in seconds. At the altar, Olivia Grant froze. The bride who had mailed him that invitation to humiliate him watched her own smile crack apart on her lips. This was not the man she had spent 2 years calling a failure, and the reason he came was worse than revenge. Liam Carter lived in the kind of quiet that most people mistook for emptiness. His apartment in downtown Boston sat 32 floors above the river, and at 6 in the morning, he was already at the window with a black coffee in his hand, watching the water move. He did not own a television. He did not keep photographs on the walls. The only personal object in the entire living room was a leather notebook on the kitchen counter, the corners worn soft from years of handling. 5 years ago, he had been someone different. He had stood in a small rented kitchen on the other side of the city, holding a ring he could barely afford, rehearsing the words he wanted to say to a woman named Olivia Grant. He never got to say them. 2 days before he planned to ask her, she sat across from him at a cheap restaurant and told him in a voice she had clearly practiced that she could not build a life out of his patience. She wanted more. She deserved more. And he said softly, was simply not going to be enough. Liam had not argued. He had not called her after she walked out. He paid the bill, drove home, and put the ring inside the leather notebook that now sat on his kitchen counter. Then he started working. He worked the way some men drink quietly daily without explanation. Within 2 years, he owned a private security firm with offices in 3 states. Within 4, his name appeared in industry reports he never bothered to read. He did not announce any of it. The only people who knew the full shape of what he had built were the men who worked for him and the lawyers who handled his contracts. Olivia, meanwhile, had built something different. She had built a story. In the social circles she still moved through, the breakup had been polished into a clean, flattering shape. She had been the one to recognize his limits, the one with the foresight to leave before she wasted her best years. She told the story so often, and with such certainty, that even she had begun to believe the version where Liam Carter had stayed exactly where she left him, small and unimpressive, somewhere far below the life she planned to have. That life in her mind had a name now: Nathan Blake. The Blakes owned property in 3 counties, and Nathan was 36, polite in the practiced way of men raised by old money. He loved Olivia with the calm confidence of someone who had never been told no. The wedding was planned for a private estate 2 hours outside the city, with 300 guests and a guest list that required staff to verify identities at the gate. Olivia had spent 11 months preparing every detail of it, and somewhere along the way she had decided that the wedding was not enough on its own. She wanted something more. The invitation she ordered for Liam was not part of the official set. She had it written by hand on heavier paper than the others, and she dropped it into the mail herself on a Tuesday afternoon. Inside the envelope, beneath the formal card, she included a smaller note folded once. The note read, "I want you to see the life I chose instead. Come. Watch." She did not sign it. She did not need to. When the envelope arrived at Liam's office 11 days before the ceremony, his assistant set it on his desk without comment. He recognized the handwriting before he opened it. He read the card. He read the note. He set both down on the surface of the desk with the same flat motion he used to set down a contract he was not going to sign. For a long time, he did nothing. The afternoon light moved across the floor of his office, and his coffee went cold in front of him, and his hand stayed flat on the paper as if he were holding it down against a wind only he could feel. His operations director, a former Army major named Robert Hayes, came in 20 minutes later with a folder he needed signed. Hayes had been with the firm since the 2nd year. He noticed the envelope, the handwriting, the stillness. He did not ask. He set the folder down, waited, and finally said, "Anything you need handled. Liam looked up at him. She wants me to come watch her get married. Hayes did not react the way most people would have. He had known Liam long enough to recognize the difference between a man who was hurt and a man who was deciding something. And he said, "And she thinks I'm still the man she walked out on," Liam said. He turned the note around on the desk, pushed it toward Hayes with one finger, and let him read it. Hayes read it twice, then set it back down. "You don't owe her anything," Hayes said. "Not a reply, not a presence, not a gift. You walk away. You've already walked away." Liam stood up from his desk and crossed to the window. The river was the same river he watched every morning. From this height, it looked almost still, the way moving things look still when you are far enough from them. He thought about the woman who had handed him back his future on a Tuesday night half a decade ago. He thought about the rehearsed voice, the careful softness of not enough. He thought about the version of himself that had paid the bill and driven home and never spoken her name out loud to another person again. "I'm not going to argue with her," he said quietly. "I'm not going to fight with her, and I'm not going to make a scene. That's not why I would go." Hayes waited. "There's something I've been carrying," Liam said. I never answered her. I never said one thing back. She spent half a decade telling people a story about me, and I've spent half a decade letting her because I didn't think it was worth correcting. But she sent me this. He gestured without turning toward the desk. She sent it on purpose. She wants me to be there. Fine, I'll be there. Once. And then I'm done with it. All of it. Hayes nodded slowly. "How do you want to walk in?" Liam turned from the window. His expression had not changed, but something underneath it had settled into place. "The way I would walk into any other meeting," he said. 3 vehicles, full detail, front and rear. I don't want noise. I don't want a show. I want her to see exactly who I am the second the gates open without me having to say a word. And Robert, I want you in the lead vehicle. I want someone there who knows why we're going." "Done," Hayes said. "One more thing." Liam glanced at him. "I'm not going there to humiliate her. Whatever happens at that wedding, I want it on the record between us. I'm not the one breaking anything. She's already broken it. I'm just going to stop pretending I never saw her do it." Hayes picked up the envelope from the desk, looked at the handwriting one more time, and set it back down with something close to respect. "Understood," he said. After he left, Liam stood alone in the quiet office for a long time. He picked up the leather notebook he carried with him to every meeting, opened it to a clean page, and wrote down a single date in small, even handwriting. Then he closed the book and slid it back into his jacket pocket. Outside, the river kept moving. The afternoon kept moving. And 2 hours away on an estate, Olivia Grant had spent 11 months preparing. The count began toward a Saturday. She believed she had already won. The morning of the wedding, Olivia Grant stood in front of a tall mirror in the bridal suite of the estate, while her mother adjusted the back of the gown. Margaret Grant had a way of speaking only when she was certain of something, and she was certain now, smoothing the fabric with the same hand she had used to wave away every doubt her daughter ever brought to her. Outside the window, the gardens were already filling with white chairs and white flowers, and the morning light was the kind that photographers paid extra to chase. Olivia studied her own face in the glass and felt for the first time in 11 months of planning that the day was finally going to do what she had built it to do. Vanessa Hill arrived at 9:30 with 2 glasses of champagne and a story she had been rehearsing for weeks. She had been Olivia's closest friend since college, and she had been the loudest voice 5 years ago, telling Olivia that the man she was dating was beneath her. Vanessa enjoyed reminding Olivia of this. She enjoyed it the way some people enjoy holding a receipt they will never need to return. She handed Olivia one of the glasses, looked her up and down, and said, "Tell me you sent it." "I sent it," Olivia said. And he didn't reply. Olivia smiled at her own reflection. Of course he didn't reply. He's not going to come, Vanessa. He doesn't come to things. That was always the problem with him. Vanessa laughed. I almost wish he would, just so the table could see what you walked away from, just so they could compare. She lifted her glass. 5 years, and he's probably still in that same apartment. Same coffee shop. Same nothing. And here you are. Margaret made a small sound from behind her daughter, the sound of a woman who agreed, but felt it was beneath her to say so out loud. Olivia caught her mother's eye in the mirror. Both of them smiled the same smile. By 11, the chairs in the garden were full. By 11:30, Nathan Blake stood near the altar in a charcoal suit that had been fitted twice, shaking hands with men who had known his father longer than they had known him. The Blake family did not so much attend events as they presided over them, and Nathan had grown up understanding that his role at his own wedding was to be calm, gracious, and slightly removed from the center of attention until the moment he was needed. Olivia had explained this to him many times. It was one of the things she liked most about him. She had also explained other things. Over the months of their engagement in soft voices on long evenings, she had told Nathan the version of her past she wanted him to carry into the marriage. There had been a man before him. Yes, years ago. Nothing serious. She had stayed too long out of pity, she said, and walked away the moment she realized he could not give her the life she wanted. Nathan had listened, kissed her forehead, and never asked the man's name. He liked Olivia's certainty about things. He took it as proof of her judgment. So when one of the groomsmen jogged up the lawn at 4 o'clock and told Nathan that 3 black SUVs had just pulled through the front gate without an appointment, Nathan's first reaction was mild irritation rather than alarm. He assumed it was a vendor, a late delivery. He turned toward the gate to wave it off, and that was when he saw the doors of the middle vehicle open and 4 men in dark suits step out in a formation that no vendor in the world had ever moved in. The 5th man to step out was not in the formation. He walked through it. He was in his middle 30s in a tailored black suit, cut close at the shoulders, and he did not look at the gate or at the guests gathering on the lawn. He looked straight up the path toward the altar, and the 4 men in dark suits adjusted their positions around him without a word from anyone. From the lead vehicle, Robert Hayes stepped out. Lass took one slow look across the property and gave a small nod that the men closest to him caught without turning their heads. Conversations along the back rows of chairs stopped first, then the rows in front of those. By the time Liam Carter had walked 20 steps up the lawn, the entire garden of 300 guests had fallen into the kind of silence that does not happen at weddings. Glasses lowered, heads turned. A string quartet that had been playing under a small white canopy let the last note fade and did not start the next one. At the altar, Nathan watched the man approach and felt for the first time since the morning something he could not immediately name. It was not fear. It was the quieter feeling that arrives a few seconds before a person realizes they have been told something untrue. In the bridal suite, Olivia did not yet know any of this. She was in the small adjacent room with her mother, fastening the last clasp of an earring, when Vanessa pushed the door open without knocking. Vanessa's face had gone the color of paper. "He's here," Vanessa said. Olivia did not turn. "Who's here?" "Liam." The hand at the earring stopped moving. "He's at the front of the lawn," Vanessa went on. "He has Olivia. He has people with him. Security. 4 of them. And cars. There are 3 black cars at the gate." Margaret Grant stepped forward with the smooth confidence she used at dinners where someone had said the wrong thing. "He's bluffing," she said. "He's borrowed a car and rented suits. That's exactly the kind of thing a man like that would do." Vanessa shook her head, her voice thinning. "Mother, they're not rented. I know what rented looks like." Olivia turned from the mirror at last. She did not look at her mother. She looked at Vanessa. "What do you mean?" "I mean he didn't come alone, and he didn't come small," Vanessa said. "I mean people are looking at him. People are getting up out of their chairs. "Olivia, you need to see this before it gets to Nathan." But it had already gotten to Nathan. By the time Olivia came down the side path toward the garden, gripping the edge of her gown to keep it off the grass, Nathan was already walking down the aisle in the wrong direction, away from the altar toward the man at the back of the lawn. Olivia saw the back of her fiancé's suit jacket before she saw anything else, and she understood at once that the carefully planned afternoon had stopped belonging to her. Liam stopped halfway up the lawn. The 4 men in dark suits stopped with him. He did not move toward the altar. He waited, hands clasped loosely in front of him, while Nathan crossed the distance between them. The guests on either side of the aisle were no longer pretending not to watch. Nathan reached him first. He was taller than Liam by an inch, and he used the inch the way men of his upbringing used everything else, with a small automatic confidence. "I think there's been a mistake," Nathan said evenly. "This is a private event." "There's no mistake," Liam answered. His voice was lower than Nathan expected it to be. Calmer. "I was invited by the bride, in her own handwriting." Nathan studied his face. "And you are Liam Carter." The name moved across Nathan's face, the way a small stone moves across the surface of still water. He did not let it show for long. He had been raised not to. But somewhere in the back of the lawn, an older guest in a navy suit took 2 steps closer to the aisle and said half to himself, half to the woman beside him, "Carter." "From Carter Protective. That's that Carter." The woman beside him turned. "The security firm. The one the airport contracts with. The one half the buildings in this state contract with." The murmur began at the back of the lawn and moved forward in a slow wave. By the time it reached the front rows, several of Nathan's older relatives had already turned in their seats. One of them, a man who had served 2 terms on a state commission and had hired Carter Protective for a venue 4 years earlier, stood up entirely. Olivia, coming down the side path at last, walked directly into the wave. She caught fragments as she passed. Carter Protective. 3 states, isn't it? I thought he didn't take social events. The fragments did not assemble into anything she could hold. She had spent 5 years describing a man who had stayed exactly where she left him. She had described him at dinners. She had described him to Nathan. She had described him to herself. None of the descriptions matched the figure standing on the lawn. She reached the aisle. 300 faces turned toward her at once, and she felt for the first time in 11 months that she was being looked at without being admired. Liam saw her. He did not change expression. He did not step forward. He simply waited the way a man waits at a doorway he has no intention of crossing first. "Liam Shore." Olivia managed. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. She tried again. "Liam, you came. You asked me to." Her hand moved up to the side of her gown without a destination. "Not like this. Not with..." "You asked me to come and watch," Liam said. "I came. The way I would come to anything else." Nathan, still standing between them, looked at Olivia, and Olivia saw in his face the first version of a question she had never prepared an answer for. He turned slightly toward her. "Olivia," he said quietly, "you told me he was..." "I told you what mattered," she said quickly. Too quickly. The wave at the back of the lawn shifted register, and she heard it, and she knew that everyone else heard her hear it. Margaret Grant arrived at her daughter's elbow with the expression of a woman about to manage a situation. "Mr. Carter," she said, with the practiced warmth she used at fundraisers. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding about the invitation. We are in the middle of a private..." "Mrs. Grant," Liam's voice cut her off without rising. "Your daughter sent me a handwritten invitation 11 days ago. Inside it, she included a note. The note asked me to come and watch the life she chose instead of mine. I'm not here to interrupt anything. I'm here because she asked me to be here." He looked at Olivia again. "And because there is something I should have said 5 years ago." The lawn went very still. Olivia's lips moved without producing sound for a moment. When her voice came back, it was lower, almost private, as if she could shrink the conversation back into something small enough to control. "Liam, don't do this. Not here. Please." "You wrote the note, Olivia. I didn't think you would actually. You sent it on purpose." His voice did not lift. It was the same flat, even voice he had used at his desk 11 days earlier. "You picked the paper. You picked the words. You wanted me to stand in front of these people on this day and be reminded of what you decided about me. So I came. And now I'm going to tell you in front of the same people what you got wrong." Vanessa Hill, 3 steps behind Olivia, made a small, involuntary sound that no one acknowledged. Nathan had taken a half step back from his bride without seeming aware of it. Liam's eyes did not leave Olivia's face. "5 years ago, you told me I would never be enough to give you the life you wanted. I believed you. I went home that night and I started building. Not for you. I want to be clear about that part. Not one piece of what I've built since then was built for you. I stopped thinking about you a long time before any of it mattered." His voice stayed quiet. "I built it because I needed to know whether you were right or whether you were just frightened. You were frightened, Olivia. You weren't right. You don't get to." Olivia's voice cracked on the second word, and she heard it crack, and she watched the entire lawn hear it crack. "I don't get to what?" Liam's tone did not sharpen. It softened, which was somehow worse. "I don't get to answer the invitation you sent me. I don't get to stand on the lawn you invited me to. You spent years telling people I was a man who couldn't keep up with you. You told this man." He gestured very slightly toward Nathan without looking at him. "You told your mother. You told your friends. You built a story you could carry into a marriage. And then, 11 days ago, you decided the story wasn't satisfying enough unless I was here to be the shape of it." Olivia opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "I'm not here for revenge," Liam said. "I want you to hear that because I know it's the version that would be easiest for you to tell yourself afterward. I'm not angry with you, Olivia. I haven't been angry with you in a long time. I came because you asked me to, and because there is one sentence I should have said 5 years ago, and I didn't, and it's been sitting in a notebook in my pocket ever since." He took the leather notebook out of his inside jacket pocket. He did not open it. He simply held it the way a man holds a thing he has carried so long it has stopped being an object and become a habit. "The sentence," he said, "is that I never owed you proof. Not then, not now, not on any day in between. You decided I wasn't enough and you walked. That was your choice. It wasn't a verdict. It was a choice. And I spent too long letting you talk about it like it was a verdict." He slid the notebook back into his jacket. "That's all I came to say." Nathan, who had been silent for nearly a full minute, finally turned his head toward Olivia. He did not raise his voice. The Blakes never raised their voices. He simply looked at her with the calm, careful expression of a man who had just realized that the woman he was about to marry had spent 11 months telling him a story whose central character had walked up his lawn and corrected it in 2 minutes. "Olivia," he said, "is any of what he just said inaccurate?" She turned toward him. She tried to summon the certainty she had used for 11 months, the certainty that had carried her through every dinner and every introduction and every quiet evening on Nathan's family porch. The certainty was not there. The mirror in the bridal suite had held it. The lawn would not. "Nathan, her voice was thin. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't. Was the note real?" She did not answer. "Olivia, was the note real?" The wave at the back of the lawn had stopped moving. 300 guests were holding very still. Margaret Grant's hand had come to rest on her daughter's arm and stopped there, useless, like a glove someone had set down on a table. Liam did not press the moment. He had not raised his voice once. He looked at Olivia for another second, the way a man looks at a door he is finally finished with, and then he stepped back from the aisle. "I won't take any more of your day," he said quietly. "I came. I watched. I said the one thing. We're done." He turned to leave. The 4 men in dark suits adjusted their positions around him the same way they had at the gate, the same way they would have if he had been walking out of any other meeting. Hayes fell in at his right shoulder without a word. Olivia stood in the middle of her own wedding, in a dress that no longer felt like hers, and watched the back of his suit move down the lawn. The story she had spent 5 years telling was walking away from her in real time, and there was nothing she could do to call it back. The 3 black SUVs cleared the front gate in the same coordinated quiet they had arrived in, and for a long moment afterward, no one in the garden spoke. 300 faces remained, turned toward the empty stretch of lawn, as if waiting for someone to tell them what had just happened was something else. Nathan was the first one to move. He did not look at his bride. He took 2 slow steps away from the aisle toward the small white canopy, where the string quartet had stopped playing, and he stood there with his hands at his sides, like a man trying to decide what part of the afternoon was still his. Olivia watched the back of his suit and understood that every careful evening she had spent shaping his understanding of her past had been undone in under 3 minutes by a man who had not once raised his voice. Margaret Grant tried to gather the moment back into something manageable. She took her daughter's elbow with the firm grip she used at fundraisers and steered her toward the side path away from the eyes on the lawn. "We are going to walk back to the suite," she said in a low voice. "We are going to fix the makeup. We are going to come back out, and we are going to finish this." Olivia did not answer. She let her mother move her. Her dress dragged against the grass, and she did not lift it. Vanessa Hill followed them halfway up the path. She had spent 5 years sharpening a story she now realized she had been wrong about from the first sentence, and she did not have the architecture for what to say next. When Margaret reached for the side door of the estate, Vanessa stopped where she was. "I can't go in there," she said quietly to no one in particular. Margaret did not turn around. Vanessa set her champagne glass down on a low garden wall and did not pick it back up. Inside the bridal suite, Olivia sat down on the edge of the long couch in the gown she could no longer feel against her skin. Margaret moved around the room the way she always moved when she was trying to manage something. Opening a compact, closing it, picking up a tissue, setting it down. "He came in here to embarrass you," she said. "That is what he came to do. Don't give him the satisfaction of carrying it for 1 more minute." "He didn't come in here to embarrass me," Olivia said. Her voice was flat. "He came in here because I asked him to." "Olivia, I asked him, Mother, in writing. I picked the paper." Margaret stopped moving. She did not have a response prepared for that sentence because she had spent 5 years agreeing with her daughter's version of events instead of asking about them. The door opened. Nathan stepped in alone. He closed it behind him with the same controlled motion he used for everything else, and he stood near the doorway rather than crossing toward her. Olivia understood the distance before he said anything. She had stood near doorways herself in other rooms with other people. She knew what it meant. "I'm not going to do this here," Nathan said quietly. "Not in front of 300 people. There are family in that garden who flew in from 4 states. There are vendors who have been paid for a year. We will sign the papers. We will walk the aisle. We will let the photographer take the pictures my mother is going to want to look at one day. None of that is for you. It's for the people on that lawn who don't deserve to be the audience for something you should have told me 11 months ago." He looked at her directly for the first time since he had walked into the room. "After today, you and I are going to have a very different conversation than the one we have been having for the last year." She nodded. She did not trust her voice. "Was there anything else?" he said. "Anything you told me about him, or about you, or about that period of your life that I should hear from you tonight, instead of from someone on a lawn?" "Nathan. Tonight, Olivia. Not now." He left the room. The ceremony went forward. It went forward the way large weddings go forward, when the people running them have already paid for everything, and the alternative is worse than the performance. Olivia walked the aisle on her father's arm, and she said the words, and Nathan said the words, and the photographer took the photographs that the family had paid for. None of it touched her. She moved through the afternoon the way a person moves through a room they no longer recognize. At the reception, the toasts were shorter than planned. Vanessa did not give hers at all. The older guests, the ones who had recognized Liam's name on the lawn, kept their conversations in low registers and excused themselves earlier than the schedule had asked for. Margaret Grant smiled at every table she passed and did not stop at any of them for long. By 9 o'clock, half the chairs were empty. 2 days later, in his office on the 32nd floor, Liam Carter signed the folder Robert Hayes had brought him the week before. He did not ask Hayes about the wedding. Hayes did not bring it up. The leather notebook sat on the corner of the desk, where it had sat for years, and Liam did not open it. He had said the sentence he had been carrying. The sentence had done what sentences do when they are finally said out loud. It had stopped weighing anything. In the late afternoon, he stood at the window with a black coffee. The river below moved the way it always moved, indifferent and slow. He thought about Olivia for one quiet moment, and then he thought about her, the way he thought about most things from a long time ago, which was not very often, and not for very long. The story she had spent half a decade telling about him no longer required a response. The lawn had been the response. There would not need to be another one. 2 hours back down the highway in a hotel room she had booked for the wedding night, Olivia Grant sat on the edge of a bed in a dress she had not yet taken off and looked at her own hands. Nathan was in the next room. The conversation he had promised her was waiting on the other side of the door, and she already knew the way a person knows whether the shape it was going to take. She had spent 5 years trying to make a man small enough to fit inside the story she wanted to tell. She had built an entire life on top of that story, and she had invited the man himself to come and stand next to it on the most public day of her life, and the story had not survived the comparison. She was the one who had to live with the rest of it now.